In 2015, a Dutch researcher named Harold Berghuis started walking across an artificial island near Surabaya, Indonesia. The island had just been built from millions of cubic meters of sand pumped off the ocean floor. Over 3 years, he picked up 6,372 fossils from the surface. Among them were 2 fragments of a human skull, 140,000 years old. The animal bones next to them had cut marks, clear evidence of butchery tools on a continent that no longer exists. But the real question is what those bones tell us about a landmass twice the size of India that vanished beneath the waves. To understand what Berghuis actually stumbled onto, we need to answer 5 questions. What exactly did he find? What was this drowned continent? How did it disappear? Who else lived there besides Homo erectus? And why, in 2025, is almost nobody looking for what remains on the sea floor? Each answer is stranger than the last. So let us start with the bones themselves. Between 2014 and 2015, a trailing suction hopper dredger was extracting over 5 million cubic meters of sand from the Madura Strait, the narrow channel between Java and Madura Island. The sand was pumped onto the coast near Gresik to build new land for an industrial development. Standard commercial dredging. Nobody was thinking about archaeology. Harold Berghuis was a researcher at Leiden University in the Netherlands. He had worked on fossils from similar dredging projects before. When he heard about the Surabaya operation, he flew to Indonesia and spent the next 3 years walking the surface of the resulting artificial island, scanning the ground for anything the dredger had pulled up from the seabed. Scanning. His haul was staggering. 6,372 vertebrate fossils representing 36 different species. Stegodon, the elephant-like creature that stood nearly 3 meters tall, with nearly straight tusks longer than a car. Rhinoceroses, Asian hippopotami, Komodo dragons, which were originally mainland predators that walked to Australia 3.8 million years ago, not the island relics we think of today. Crocodiles, river sharks, multiple species of deer, bovids, water turtles, and fish. Staggering. And then there were the 2 pieces of human skull, catalogued as MS1 and MS2. MS1 was a right frontal bone with a thick brow ridge. MS2 was a parietal fragment from a younger individual. CT scans at the University of Tokyo matched them to late Homo erectus populations from the famous Solo River sites at Ngandong and Sambungmakan on Java. Luminescence dating placed them between 146,000 and 131,000 years ago. Homo erectus. But here is what made the discovery genuinely new. The water turtle bones had cut marks on them. The bovid long bones had been deliberately cracked open, a signature of marrow extraction. This kind of hunting and processing behavior had never been documented for Homo erectus on Java before. Berghuis himself pointed out that this behavior was previously only known from more modern human species on the Asian mainland land. His conclusion was direct. Either Homo erectus developed these techniques independently, or there was contact between different hominin groups, perhaps even genetic exchange. Marrow extraction. These are the first human fossils ever recovered from the submerged Sunda Shelf. Before 2025, not a single hominin bone had been pulled from the drowned continent. The Indonesian government is now reportedly drafting guidelines that would require sand mining companies to report fossil finds within 48 hours, which could transform thousands of commercial dredging operations across the archipelago into accidental research platforms. First, but those 2 skull fragments only tell one part of the story, because the strait where they were found was not a strait 140,000 years ago. It was dry land, roughly 60 meters above sea level, and it was connected to a continent that stretched from mainland Malaysia to Borneo, Java, Sumatra, and Bali in one continuous tropical landmass. dry land. That brings us to the second question. What was Sundaland? At the last glacial maximum, roughly 26,000 to 19,000 years ago, sea levels dropped more than 120 meters below where they sit today. That drop exposed approximately 1.85 million square kilometers of continental shelf across Southeast Asia. The total landmass, including the highland islands we see today, covered around 4 million square kilometers. That is comparable to the entire Indian subcontinent. It was 14 times larger than Doggerland, the drowned land between Britain and continental Europe that has received decades of research funding and international attention. And this was not barren tidal flat. For decades, the prevailing theory held that exposed Sundaland was mostly dry savanna grassland, a barrier that separated rainforest populations on the surrounding highlands. In 2024, a team led by Hamilton published a major analysis in PNAS, examining 59 paleoecological records from across the region. Their conclusion overturned that entire model. Sundaland, at the height of the Ice Age, was dominated by forest mosaics, not open savanna. A separate study by Berghuis and colleagues in PNAS modeled 317 individual dipterocarp species and found that rainforests persisted across central Sundaland even at peak glaciation. Montane forests expanded downslope under cooler conditions. The only significant savanna patches existed in rain shadow areas of southern Borneo and parts of Java. This matters because it means the drowned continent was not empty grassland. It was thick, productive tropical forest, exactly the kind of environment that supports large human populations. 4 massive rivers drained this landscape. The largest, known as the Molengraaf River, or North Sunda River, collected water from central Sumatra and western Borneo and flowed northeast into what is now the South China Sea. Its sediment records stretch back 570,000 years. The East Sunda River drained the Java Sea basin. The Siam River extended the modern Chao Phraya through the Gulf of Thailand, and the Malacca Strait River flowed through the narrow passage between Sumatra and the Malay Peninsula. The way these rivers were originally discovered tells you something about how long scientists have known this land existed. In the early 20th century, a Dutch geologist named Molengraaf noticed that identical freshwater fish species lived in Borneo's Kapuas River and Sumatra's Musi River. Those species could only coexist if the two rivers had once been connected. He was right. And in 2025, Chung and Faidi published updated maps in the Journal of Paleogeography using new multibeam sonar data from 905 cruises, confirming and refining the entire drainage network. The Gulf of Thailand contained a freshwater lake roughly the size of Portugal, around 93,000 square kilometers, sitting at about 55 meters below present sea level. 32 additional submerged depressions across the shelf may have been smaller paleo lakes. This was a continent with a complete hydrological system, vast forests, and an astonishing roster of megafauna. The largest animal walking Sundaland was Stegodon zdansky, a proboscidean standing nearly 4 meters tall and weighing an estimated 12.7 tons, larger than any elephant alive today. Its tusks were nearly straight and positioned so close together that the trunk had to rest on top of them rather than hanging between them. A smaller relative, Stegodon florensis insularis, managed to survive on the island of Flores until roughly 12,000 years ago, making it the last known stegodon anywhere on Earth. But the full roster of Sundaland's wildlife was far wider than elephants. Tigers, spotted hyenas, rhinoceroses, tapirs, Asian hippopotami, orangutans ranging far beyond their current island refuges, giant pangolins, giant tortoises of the genus Megalocalis, and on Flores, a giant stork called Leptoptelos robustus that stood taller than a grown man. Julian Lewis, a paleontologist specializing in Southeast Asian megafauna, made a point in 2007 that still has not received the attention it deserves. Unlike other regions where megafauna went extinct primarily from human hunting, in Southeast Asia, sea level rise itself may have been the dominant extinction driver. Many species drowned with their habitat. It was bounded by one of the most ancient barriers in biology. The Wallace Line runs between Bali and Lombok, and between Borneo and Sulawesi. Even with sea levels 120 meters lower than today, deep oceanic channels persisted along this boundary. The Lombok Strait kept a minimum depth of 250 meters. The Makassar Strait reaches 2,500 meters, carved by tectonic rifting 48 million years ago. These are not erosional features. They are structural boundaries older than the human lineage itself. Only animals that could swim, fly, or raft on vegetation could cross. Stegodon managed it, reaching Flores at least twice. Homo floresiensis, the famous hobbit, may have rafted across. For most land species, the Wallace Line was an invisible wall at the edge of the world. So now we know what Sundaland looked like. A forested tropical continent the size of India, crossed by great rivers, dotted with lakes, and patrolled by predators larger than anything alive in Southeast Asia today. The next question is how something this vast could simply disappear. The answer came in 3 waves, and each one was worse than the last. The first catastrophic event is known as Meltwater Pulse 1A. Around 14,650 years ago, global sea levels surged between 16 and 25 meters in just 400 to 500 years. On the Sunda Shelf specifically, research published in Science by Hannebuth, Stadtegger, and Grutus documented a 16-meter rise in only 300 years, between 14,600 and 14,300 years ago. That translates to 40 to 60 millimeters per year, roughly 10 times the current rate of sea level rise. But the raw numbers do not capture what actually happened on the ground. The Sunda Shelf is extraordinarily flat. Gradients are often less than 1 in 10,000. On terrain that level, a single meter of vertical sea level rise pushes the coastline back between 1 and 10 kilometers. At peak inundation, the sea was swallowing more than 1,260 square kilometers per year. That is the area of Los Angeles consumed annually. Within a single human lifetime of roughly 50 years, the ocean rose 2 to 3 meters. River mouths shifted kilometers upstream. Freshwater systems turned brackish, and storm surges flooded areas far beyond normal tide lines. The second pulse, Meltwater Pulse 1B, struck around 11,500 years ago. Another 8 to 14 meters of rise occurred in 250 to 500 years. This event likely breached the outlet sill of the freshwater lake sitting in what is now the Gulf of Thailand. A body of water the size of Portugal, 4 times larger than Lake Erie, was flooded with salt water. Borneo separated from the Malay Peninsula. The Java Sea expanded dramatically. The final submergence, sometimes called Meltwater Pulse 1C, came between 8,200 and 7,600 years ago, linked to the catastrophic drainage of glacial lakes Agassiz and Ojibwe in North America. These were not ordinary lakes. Lake Agassiz, at its maximum extent, covered roughly 440,000 square kilometers, larger than any freshwater body on Earth today. When the ice dam holding it failed, an estimated 105 cubic kilometers of fresh water had dumped into the ocean in a matter of years. The pulse it sent through global oceans pushed sea levels to their present position around 6,500 years ago. And then they actually overshot, rising 3 to 5 meters above present levels during the mid-Holocene high stand before settling back. By the time the last of these 3 pulses had passed, 2.53 million square kilometers of Sundaland had vanished beneath the ocean. To put that in perspective, the entire continent of Australia is 7.7 million square kilometers. What sank was roughly a third of Australia. Cannon and colleagues described the ecological impact in terms that sound almost apocalyptic. Coastal and swamp evergreen rainforests experienced a sudden and complete geographic relocation over hundreds of kilometers. And this was not a gradual process that people simply adapted to. In 2023, Kim and colleagues published a study in Communications Biology analyzing 763 genomes from 59 ethnic groups across Southeast and South Asia. Their conclusion was explicit. Meltwater Pulse 1A and 1B reduced Sundaland's land area by more than 50%. The genetic evidence reveals the earliest documented instance of forced human migration driven by sea level rise. Specifically, Malaysian Negrito populations were pushed from the drowning lowlands of Sundaland into South Asia. This is not a hypothesis. This is genomic proof that actual populations were displaced by the flooding. If you have stayed with us this far, you clearly care about the science behind lost civilizations. Like and subscribe so we can keep making these deep dives. Now we know what Sundaland was and how it drowned. But Homo erectus was not the only species walking across that continent. The next part of this story involves a species so elusive that for years scientists knew it existed only because its DNA kept appearing inside living people. They are called Denisovans, and until very recently, the total physical evidence for their existence on the entire planet amounted to a finger bone, a few teeth, and a jawbone from a Tibetan cave. No complete skeleton, no tools confidently attributed to them, no settlements. But their genetic fingerprint is everywhere across island Southeast Asia and Oceania. The Ita Magbukan people of the Philippines carry roughly 5% Denisovan DNA, the highest proportion recorded anywhere on Earth, 30 to 40% more than Papuans or indigenous Australians. In April 2025, a study published in Science by Tsutaya, Welker, Chang, and colleagues finally confirmed something that had been debated for over a decade. A jawbone known as Penghu 1, originally dredged from the Taiwan Strait seabed at 60 to 120 meters depth, roughly 25 kilometers off Taiwan's western coast, was identified as Denisovan. The identification came through protein analysis. 4,241 amino acid residues from 51 proteins produced 2 variant sequences matching Denisovan-specific markers. The specimen was male. Fluorine dating placed him between 10,000 and 70,000, or between 130,000 and 190,000 years ago. The Taiwan Strait where his jaw was found was dry land during glacial periods, directly connected to the Sunda Shelf. Then in June 2025, an even more dramatic confirmation arrived. 2 papers published simultaneously in Cell and Science by Qiaomei Fu and colleagues at the Chinese Academy of Sciences revealed that the famous Harbin cranium, one of the most complete archaic human skulls ever discovered, belongs to a Denisovan. The backstory of this skull reads like a thriller. In 1933, a Chinese construction worker was building a bridge over the Songhua River in Harbin when he pulled an enormous skull from the sediment. The brain cavity measured 1,420 milliliters, larger than the modern human average. The brow ridges were massive. The teeth were oversized. The worker wrapped the skull, hid it in a well beneath his family home, and told no one. 85 years later, on his deathbed in 2018, he finally told his family where he had buried it. The skull was recovered, and researchers extracted mitochondrial DNA from just 0.3 milligrams of dental calculus, fossilized plaque on the teeth. 95 endogenous proteins were identified, 3 of them carrying Denisovan-specific amino acid variants. For the first time in the history of paleoanthropology, we have a face for the Denisovans. But the genetic story goes deeper. In 2019, Jacobs and colleagues published research in Cell identifying not 1, but 3 distinct Denisovan lineages in the DNA of modern Southeast Asian and Oceanian populations. The lineage called D0 is closest to the original Altai Denisovan from Siberia and appears mainly in East Asians. D1 is found only in Papuans, with an estimated introgression date of roughly 29,800 years ago. D2 is spread widely across Asia and Oceania, introgressing around 45,700 years ago. D1 and D2 diverged from each other more than 350,000 years ago. That means at least 2 genetically distinct Denisovan populations were living in Southeast Asia for hundreds of thousands of years, long enough to become separate lineages. Murray Cox of Massey University put it plainly. People used to think that Denisovans lived on the Asian mainland and far to the north. Our work instead shows that the center of archaic diversity was not in Europe or the frozen north, but instead in tropical Asia. And the evidence keeps accumulating. In a cave called Leang Panenge on South Sulawesi, archaeologists found the burial of a 17 or 18-year-old female who died roughly 7,200 years ago. Her DNA carried 2.2% Denisovan ancestry, but she also belonged to a previously unknown human lineage that had split from the Australo-Papuan line around 37,000 years ago. She is known as the Toalean girl, or Bess, and she represents the first ancient human genome ever recovered from the region called Wallacea, the island chain between the Sunda and Sahul shelves. Cosimo Post, of the University of Tübingen, who led the analysis, stated that the geographic distribution of Denisovans and modern humans may have overlapped directly in this zone. He called Wallacea the key place where Denisova people and the ancestors of indigenous Australians and Papuans interbred. In 2025, the C3K Genome Atlas, published in Nature by He, Peng, and colleagues at the Kunming Institute of Zoology, analyzed 3,023 genomes from 30 mainland Southeast Asian populations across 6 countries and 5 language families. Before this study, fewer than 200 indigenous genomes from the entire region existed in global databases. The atlas identified 79.59 million small genetic variants, of which 22.83 million were entirely novel, never recorded anywhere before. Multiple Denisovan introgression patterns were confirmed, and some Denisovan-derived genetic fragments appear to have been adaptively selected for immune defense. A second phase, CA10K, will extend the analysis to island Southeast Asian populations. So we have a species whose DNA is woven through millions of living people across Southeast Asia. We have at least 2 distinct Denisovan lineages that diverged hundreds of thousands of years apart. We have a face, a jaw from the seafloor, a teenage girl buried on Sulawesi carrying their genetic signature, and protein-confirmed identifications from 2 separate labs. But we have 0 Denisovan fossils from the lowland Sunda Shelf itself. Teixeira and colleagues confirmed in 2021 in Nature Ecology and Evolution that while Denisovan ancestry is widespread across the region, there is no trace of admixture from any of the other known archaic species in island Southeast Asia, not from Homo erectus, not from Homo floresiensis, not from Homo luzonensis. The Denisovans were a separate population entirely, and their homeland is almost certainly beneath the sea. In hot, humid tropical conditions, that destroy bones and DNA faster than nearly any other environment on Earth. That leads us to the final question, and it is the one that should bother you the most. Why is almost nobody looking? Nick Fleming, the marine archaeologist behind the SplashCOS database, has documented over 3,000 submerged prehistoric sites worldwide. His finding was blunt. Not a single site has been found between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. The entire tropical zone of the planet is a complete archaeological blank when it comes to underwater sites. The first tropical submerged site found anywhere on Earth was Cape Bruguiere Channel in Australia, discovered in 2020. It contained 7,000-year-old stone tools sitting at just 2.4 meters depth. In all of Indonesia, there is exactly one submerged cave with evidence of past human activity. Song Toyapake, off Nusa Penida, near Bali, at 16 meters depth, was studied by marine archaeologist Gendro Keling from Bryn in 2023. Compare that to Doggerland, Europe's drowned landscape between Britain and the continent. It covered roughly 180,000 square kilometers, 1/14 the size of Sundaland. Hundreds of artifacts and multiple settlement sites have been found there. The Europe's Lost Frontiers project received a 2.5 million euros ERC grant. Ancient DNA has been extracted from 252 sediment samples. The University of Bradford is running an AI project searching 188,000 square kilometers for submerged settlements. Oil company Petroleum Geoservices provided three-dimensional seismic survey data that made much of this possible. No equivalent commercial or academic dataset exists for the Java Sea. We have mapped the surface of Mars at 20-meter resolution and the Moon at 2.1 meters. As of June 2025, the Seabed 2030 project reports that only 27.3% of Earth's ocean floor has been mapped to modern standards. Mapping the entire ocean floor would cost $3 to $5 billion, roughly one Mars mission. A single survey ship would need 1,000 years. And yet there are reasons to believe that extraordinary things survive on the Sunda Shelf. Indonesia hosts the world's oldest confirmed cave art, a 67,800-year-old hand stencil at Liang Metanduno on Muna Island, published in Nature in 2025. Narrative cave paintings at Leang Karampuang on Sulawesi date to 51,200 years, the oldest known depiction of a story anywhere on Earth. A warty pig painted on the wall of Leang Tedonge is at least 45,500 years old. These sites are all on highland islands that survived the flooding. If comparable artistic traditions existed among the populations living on lowland Sundaland, and given the genetic continuity across the region, there is no reason to think they did not. That art is now underwater. The idea that cave paintings could survive submersion is not speculation. France's Cosquer Cave, near Marseille, contains Paleolithic paintings dating from 27,000 to 19,000 years ago. The cave entrance is 37 meters beneath the surface of the Mediterranean, accessible only through a 137-meter underwater tunnel. The paintings survived because the chamber itself remained above the internal waterline, even after the entrance flooded. Similar geological formations almost certainly exist across the limestone, karst landscapes of the Sunda Shelf. The technology to find them exists. Autonomous underwater vehicles, sub-bottom profilers, sedimentary ancient DNA extraction. The barrier is not technology, it is funding and political will. There is one piece of physical evidence that may have survived the flooding. In the highlands of West Java, on what would have been elevated terrain overlooking the vast lowland plains of Sundaland, sits a site called Gunung Padang. Geophysical surveys conducted between 2011 and 2014 by Danny Hillman Natawijaja using ground-penetrating radar, electrical resistivity, seismic tomography, and core drilling detected 4 distinct construction layers inside the hill, with the deepest claimed to date between 25,000 and 14,000 years ago. A paper published in Archaeological Prospection in October 2023 was retracted in March 2024. All 12 authors rejected the retraction and called it censorship. The core criticism, raised by archaeologist Flint Dibble at Cardiff University, was that the team dated soil, not artifacts. Fair point. But the geophysical structures themselves were never retracted. Something is inside that hill. Multiple independent technologies confirm it. And during one borehole, 32,000 liters of water vanished into a void at 8 meters depth. Whether that void is artificial or a natural volcanic feature remains an open question. What makes this relevant to Sundaland is straightforward. If any civilization existed on the lowland plains now underwater, hilltop monuments in the surviving highlands would be the only structures with a chance of surviving the flooding. The lowlands are gone. The river valleys are gone. The coastal settlements, if they existed, are gone. What remains above water are the mountaintops, the volcanic ridges, the elevated plateaus. Gunung Padang sits on exactly such terrain, and the archaeological context around it adds another layer. Bone tools found in a cave less than 30 miles from Gunung Padang have been dated to 7,000 BCE. If the people living in caves nearby were using basic bone implements, the question of who built the stone structures on the hilltop above them remains unanswered. This is not a claim about ancient advanced civilizations. It is a question about timeline and capability that nobody has adequately addressed. And then there are the stories. 307 flood myths have been collected from Vietnamese ethnic groups alone. Every culture across Southeast Asia tells of a catastrophic deluge. Patrick Nunn, a geographer at the University of the Sunshine Coast and a contributing author to the IPCC, has documented that Aboriginal Australian oral traditions accurately describe sea level rise events from 7,000 to over 13,000 years ago, with correct geographic details. The Yidinji people near Cairns recall a time when Fitzroy Island was attached to the mainland. It was over 7,000 years ago. These are not legends. They are survival memories encoded in oral tradition and passed down for hundreds of generations. We started with Harold Berghuis walking across an artificial island made from the floor of the Madura Strait. 6,372 fossils, 2 Homo erectus skull fragments, cut marks on animal bones that rewrite what we thought we knew about the oldest human species on Java. And that was from one dredging operation at one location on a shelf that spans 1.85 million square kilometers. There is a continent beneath the Java Sea. Multiple human species lived on it for at least 140,000 years, and probably far longer. It was drowned by 3 catastrophic floods that displaced entire populations. Floods so devastating that the memory of them survives in oral traditions to this day. The technology to explore it exists, but the funding does not. Berghuis said the answers may very well be at the bottom of the sea. The question is whether anyone will go looking for them.